Are you able to assure us now that this Iran 2.0 deal, is this now off the table 100%, or is it just delayed until the midterms are over and we sort of, both countries re-examine it?
Joe Biden has been very clear, okay? Very clear. He is not going to stand by and let Iran obtain a nuclear weapon.
Welcome back to the Rosenberg Report as we continue our look at how best to handle the growing and grave threat posed by the apocalyptic regime in Tehran. A few comments on that last interview. Fascinating conversation with Zahi Hanegbi, sobering, almost chilling. Hanegbi is one of Israel's most experienced legislators and national security experts. He's been close to Netanyahu for more than 3 decades. But what I found clear was that he doesn't have any confidence that President Biden truly understands the magnitude of the Iran nuclear threat, or is willing to take decisive actions to neutralize that threat. And in his first interview on this subject in English, Hanegbi was refreshingly candid. He believes that Netanyahu specifically chose to run again in order to deal with the Iran threat once and for all. He said that Bibi is actively preparing to go to war with Iran and to do so alone if he has to. And while Hanegbi didn't lay out a specific time frame, it was clear to me that he believes that time is running out. So, what's the Biden administration's perspective on all of this? I sat down with Tom Nides, Biden's ambassador to Israel, to find out. Ambassador Nides, thank you so much for spending a few minutes. First of all, I understand this is your first media interview, TV interview at least, since the Israeli elections?
And I wanted to save it for you.
Well, that's very kind. And do I also understand this is your first interview as ambassador with any Christian media?
I think that's right.
What do evangelicals need to know about you as an ambassador and as from a Jewish background?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'm glad to be here on the show. I heard it's doing very well. So congratulations.
So far, so good.
Listen, I'm a Jewish kid from Minnesota.
Yeah.
I grew up the youngest of 8 kids. My parents were, as we like to refer to as Reformed Jews. My father was the head of the UGA, president of the temple. My mother was head of Sisterhood and Hadassah. We were cultural Jews, went to temple a couple times a year. We lit the candles on Friday night. I grew up being a Jew. I grew up being about a community and giving back. That's how I interpret being Jewish. I came to Israel for the first time when I was 14.
14, really?
And
wow.
I fell in love with not only the country, as one would do, but what it stands for and what it's important to not only Christians and not only Jews, but Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians and those who live in Israel. So it is the melting pot.
You also come not as a career foreign service person. You're really in venture capital, private equity, banking, but also as with diplomatic experience. You were Deputy Secretary of State under President Obama, and now here you are, President Biden's point man at a very interesting time. So we've got to get into the issues. Let's just start. You just had a phone call with Prime Minister-elect Benjamin Netanyahu, and President Biden just had that call just within 24 hours of this interview taping. So what did you say? What did the president say? Where are we with this relationship?
It was very friendly. I obviously have a deep sense of this is a guy who cares deeply about the state of Israel, cares about the Jewish people, cares about the bilateral relationship with the United States. No question about that. President Biden's conversation with him, which was last night, they've known each other for almost 40 years.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And he made it very clear to the Prime Minister they want to work together with him. They want to strengthen and continue to strengthen this unbreakable ties between our two countries. And we'll work very closely with this government as it's formed and work with them on the issues that bind us together.
Do you know that most evangelical Christians are not politically, ideologically aligned with the president? But I think there's no other issue that makes evangelicals and Jews who love Israel, all people who love Israel, more nervous than the Iran threat. So are you able to assure us now that this Iran 2.0 deal, is this now off the table 100%, or is it just delayed until the midterms are over and we sort of, both countries re-examine it?
Joe Biden has been very clear, okay? Very clear. He is not going to stand by and let Iran obtain a nuclear weapon. Again, stand by and to allow them to get a nuclear weapon. He also was very clear that the conditions that needed to be met by the Iranians if we were going to re-engage in what we refer to as the JCPOA, right? The 2.0, as you said. They have not been met, okay? Not only have they not been met, but things have gotten even worse. We are nowhere close to having a deal with the Iran.
But the deal is not off the table. If the Iranians are willing to re-engage,
nothing's ever off the table. Why would you? Your viewers wouldn't want us to say under no circumstances are we ever going to cut a deal and try to stop this nuclear program. If I told you that, you'd be looking at me like, what?
Do we want a diplomatic solution as opposed to war? There's no debate about that.
Right.
But let's talk about what some Democrats are saying about this particular deal, which is making people so nervous. So if you have some Democratic congressman, Josh Gottheimer, for example,
yes.
We interviewed him
Josh is my friend.
Well, good. So he could not be a more faithful Democrat, but he is dead set against the specifics of this deal. I would also give you an example of Dennis Ross. Dennis, of course, a senior advisor.
Also a very good friend of mine.
Good, and me as well. He's made it crystal clear this deal doesn't actually stop Iran from getting the bomb. So what it would do is remove economic sanctions. So this makes people who say, okay, there's no question Biden loves Israel. You can disagree on the two-state solution or this particular thing or that, but how can you say you love Israel and potentially give or open the door to $1 trillion to a terrorist regime?
Joel, let me just be clear. There's no question that there are concerns among Democrats and Republicans, Jews and Christians alike. Okay, Joe Biden would say that. There would be no. If we ever got back in deal, there's never a perfect deal per se. Okay, and it's legitimate. There's no question that if in any kind of quote deal that the Iranians would get money, and we certainly understand the anxiety that people have. Here's the deal. There is no deal at this point. And as I said a moment ago, I'm not holding my breath for any negotiation with the Iranians in this current form, and I'm certainly respectful of people's views.
I'm holding my breath, and many evangelicals are holding a breath that we want that deal off the table. And it makes us nervous. Not the concept of diplomacy, but of the specifics. Look, I like the ambassador. He's warm, gregarious, and a straight shooter. And I'm grateful that he was willing to go on the record. In fact, we covered many other topics, and you can find the full interview on All Israel News. But here's the problem. It's not Nides. It's the president. It's the policy. It's the misunderstanding of the nature of the Iranian regime and what they really want. And it's not just me and millions of evangelicals who are worried that the Biden approach risks cutting Israel loose to face Iran alone. In a moment, we'll hear from a Democratic member of Congress who's just as worried. Welcome back to the Rosenberg Report as we continue to unpack the Biden approach towards the Iran threat and whether this is going to force incoming Prime Minister Netanyahu to launch a full-scale military attack on Iran because neither Washington nor anyone else in the world is willing to take decisive action to truly neutralize Tehran before it's too late. Now, what's interesting to me is that a growing number of Democrats in Congress are speaking out against the White House approach. And even though the House has just flipped to Republican control, the voice of these Democrats are more important than ever. Tal Heinrich is a senior correspondent for All Israel News. She's also the producer of the Rosenberg Report. And I recently asked Tal to sit down with Congressman Josh Gottheimer, the New Jersey Democrat who's emerged as a courageous leader on this critical issue. They spoke at the Jerusalem Post conference in Manhattan.
Although recent negotiations with Iran have not yet concluded at the moment, we are recording this interview. We're not sure where things are standing. But you have decided not to remain quiet against what seems to be shaping up as a dangerous deal. Not only you did that, you also rallied behind you a bipartisan group of Democrat and Republican congressmen to send a letter to the president and express your concerns. So what are your concerns?
Well, I think, first of all, the entire approach since the beginning on JCPOA to me has been failed, right? So go back to the original deal. And so this is just a continuation of failure, right? presumes that the Iranians, leadership there, will ever tell the truth, whether that's how much they actually wanted to enrich uranium, which first was keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Now it's to break out and have a nuclear weapon. In terms of their terrorist activity, which has not stopped, it's gotten worse, right? Not just through their proxies, the Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Jihad, attacks on Americans and our allies and our bases, but now the RGC has directly been attacking as well. So I opposed the deal as a candidate in a time where, of course, you're trying to make sure your party supports you, and I stood up to the party and obviously took a different view than the president, which wasn't so popular to do, but I felt very strongly. I mean, again, I think this has been consistently flawed. And then I got to Congress, and now this letter that I led, I've led several letters this Congress. Every time it seems like there's momentum behind it. But most recently, we got 50 members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, including 34 Democrats, which is a big show of support to the administration saying, please don't move forward with this. We're very concerned. And if you're going to move forward, before you move forward with any deal, come to the Congress.
Let us know.
Let us know what you're talking about here, any side deals that you're making. Give us a sense of what this is about, because we're very concerned, rightly, about moving forward.
Wow, thanks so much, Tal. Great interview. I couldn't be more grateful for each of our guests tonight. Netanyahu confidant Tzachi Hanegbi, who served in the Knesset and top cabinet positions here in Jerusalem since 1988. President Biden's ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides, and Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer. 3 fascinating perspectives on the single most serious issue facing the existence of the modern state of Israel and the future of U.S.-Israeli relations. Well, that's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. With such storm clouds building, please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and our neighbors. Pray for American leaders, whether you voted for them or not. Pray, of course, for Israel's leaders. Pray, too, for the leaders of our Arab allies in the region who feel just as threatened by the Iranian regime. And pray not just for our allies, but also for our enemies, as Christ commanded us. For the leaders in Tehran and Damascus and Moscow, for the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah and other terrorist groups, that God would save them or remove them. Be sure to go to the RosenbergReport.com site, sign up for our free email updates that include details about every show and a link to every full episode so you can watch them again and share them on social media with family and friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our new YouTube channel. Have a great week. And Lord willing, I'll see you again next week right here on the Rosenberg Report.